The Daughter of the Regiment, by Rudyard Kipling. Jane Arden was a sergeant's wife woos, she married of I.M. in Aldershot, and comed across the sea chorus. Ave you never eared tell, O Jane Arden, Jane Arden, Jane Arden Ave, you never eared tell, O Jane Arden the pride, O the company old barrack room ballad. A gentleman who doesn't know the Circassian circle ought not to stand up for itbitin, everybody out, that was what Miss McKenna said. And the sergeant who was my vis-a-vis looked the same thing. I was afraid of Miss McKenna. She was 6 feet high, all yellow freckles, and red hair, and was simply clad in white satin, shoes, a pink muslin dress, an apple green stuff sash, and black silk gloves with yellow roses in her hair, wherefore I fled from Miss McKenna, and sought my friend Private Mulvaney, who was at the cantrefreshment table. So you've been dancin' with little Johnsy McKenna Sosh, that's goin' to marry Corporal Slane when you next converse. Would your lords and your ladies tell thim, you've danced wid little Johnsy Tees, a thing to be proud av. But I wasn't proud, I was humble. I saw a story in Private Mulvaney's eye, and besides, if he stayed too long at the bar, he would, I knew, qualify for more packdrill now, to meet an esteemed friend doing packdrill. Outside the guardroom is embarrassing, especially if you happen to be walking with his commanding officer. Come on to the parade ground, Mulvaney, it's cooler there. And tell me about Miss McKenna. What is she, and who is she, and why is she called Johnsy? Die main to say you've never heard av ud Pamilo's daughter, and you thinkin' you know things. I am widgy, in a minute when me poip's lit. We came out under the stars. Mulvaney sat down on one of the artillery bridges, and began in the usual way, his pipe between his teeth, his big hands clasped and dropped between his knees, and his cap well on the back of his head. When Mrs. Mulvaney, that is was Miss Shadd, that was you were a dale younger than you are now, and the army was different in several essentials. Boys have no call for to marry nowadays, and that's why the army has so few raw good honest swearin' strapagen, tender-hearted heavy-footed wives. As ut used to have when I was a corporal, I was reduced afterward, but no matter, I was a corporal onst in thim times. A man lived and died wid his regiment, and by nater he married when he was a man. When I was corporal, mother av hiven how the regiment has died and been born. Since that damy colour sergeant was ud McKennon a married man too, and his wife his first wife, for he married 3 times. Did McKenna was Bridget McKenna from Portarlington, like meself, I've misremembered what her first name was, but in B company, we called her ud Pamilo, by reason av her figure, which was entirely circumferential, like the big drum. Now that woman, God rock her soul to rest in glory, was for everlastin' havin' child her and McKenna. When the 5th or 6th come squallin' on to the musterroll, swore he would number thim off in future. But ud Pamilo, she prayed av him to christen them after the names av the stations they was born in. So there was Calaba McKenna and Mutra McKenna, and a whole presidency av other McKennas, and little Johnsy dancin' over yonder. When the child her wasn't born in, they was dying for av our child her die like sheep in these days, they died like flies thin. I lost me own little Shad, but no matter teas long ago, and Mrs. Mulvaney niver had another. I am digression. One divil's hot summer, there come an order from some mad agent, whose name I misremember, for the regiment to go up country. Maybe they wanted to know how the new rail carried throops. They knew, on me soul they knew, before they was done. Old Pamilo had just buried Mutra McKenna, and the season bane unwholesome. Only little Johnsy McKenna, who was 4-year-old thin, was left on hand. 5 children gone in 14 months. 'Twas had wasn't ut. So we went up to our new station in that blazin' heat. May the curse av St. Lawrence consume the man who gave the order. Will I ever forget that move? They gave us 2 wake thrains to the regiment, and we was 800 and 70 strong. There was a B, C, and D companies in the 2nd thrain, wid 12 women, no officers, ladies, and 13 childher. We was to go 600 miles, and railways was new in thim days. When we had been a night in the belly av the thrainth men ragin' in their shirts, and drinkin' anything they could find, and eatin' bad fruitstuff when they could, for we couldn't stop 'em. I was a corporal. Thinth cholera bruck out wid the dawnin' av the day. Pray to the saints you may niver see cholera in a throop thrain teas, like the judgment av God hittin' down from the naked sky. We run into a riscampas. Ut might have been Ludiany, but not by any means so comfortable. The officer commandin' sent a telegraph up the line 300 mile up, askin' for help. Faith, we wanted ut for ivery soul. Av the followers ran for the dear life as soon as the thrain stopped, and by the time that telegraphed was writ, there wasn't a nager in the station, except in the telegraph clerkin. He only because he was held down to his chair by the scruff av his sneakin' black neck. Thin the day began with the noise in the cages and the rattle av the men on the platform fallen over arms and all as they stood for to answer the company muster roll before goin' over to the camp. Tisn't for me to say what like the cholera was like. Maybe the doctor could ha tood av he hadn't dropped onto the platform from the door av a carriage where we was talking out the dead. He died with the rest. Some boys had died in the night. We tuck out Sivan, and 20 more was sickin' in. As we tuck them, the women was huddled up anyways screamin' wid fear. Says the commandin' orficer, whose name I misremember, take the women over to that tope av trees yonder. Get them out av the camp. Tees no place for them. Ud Pamelo was sittin' on her bed and roll thryin' to cape little Johnsy quiet go off to that tope. Says the orficer go out av the men's way. Be damned av I do, says Ud Pamelo, and little Johnsy squattin' by her mother's side squeaks out, be damned av I do too. Thin Ud Pamelo turns to the women, and she says, are ye goin' to let the boys die? While you're a picnickin', ye sluts, says she. Tease water they want. Come on and help. With that she turns up her sleeves and steps out for a well behind the wrist. Camp little Johnsy trottin' behind wid a lotta and String and the other women followin' like lambs wid horse buckets and cookin' pots. When all the things was full, Ud Pamelo marches back into camp. 'Twas like a battlefield wid all the glory missin' at the hid av the regiment av women. McKenna, me man, she says wid a voice on her like Grandron's challenge. Tell the boys to be quiet. Ud Pamelo's common to look after thimwid free da trinks. Thin we cheered, and the cheerin' in the lines was louder than the noise av the poor divils wid the sickness on thim, but not much. You see, we was a new and raw regiment in those days, and we could make neither head nor tail av the sickness, and so we was useless. The men was goin' round and about like dumb sheep waitin' for the next man to fall over and sayin' under their spash, F what is ut in the name av God, F what is ut. 'Twas horrible, but through ut all up and down and up went Ud Pamelo and little Jansial. We could see av the baby under a dead man's helmet with the chinstrap swingin' about her little stomach cup, and down with the water and F what brandy there was. Now and thin Ud Pamelo, the tears runnin' down her fat red face, says me boys, me poor dead darlin' boys. But for the most, she was thryin' to put heart into the men and cape thim stiddy, and little Johnsy was tellin' thim all they would be better in the mornin'. 'Twas a thrick shed picked up from hearin' Ud Pamelo when Mutra was burnin' out wid fever in the mornin'. 'Twas the everlastin' mornin' at St. Pether's Gate, was the mornin' for 27 good men, and 20 more was sick to the death in that bitter burnin' sun. But the women worked like angels, as I've said, and the men like divils, till 2 doctors come down from above, and we was rescued. But just before that, Ud Pamelo on her knees over a boy in my squadrite caught man to me. He was in the barrack tellin' him the word av the church that niver failed a man, yet says, hood me up boys, I'm feelin' bloody. Sick. 'Twas the sun, not the cholera, did ut. She misremembered, she was only wearin' her Ud black bonnet, and she died wid McKenna, me man, hoodin' her up, and the boys howled when they buried her. That night a big wind blew and blew and blew and blew the tents flat, but it blew the cholera away and niver another case. There was all the while we was waitin' days in quarantine. Av you will belave me, the thrack av the sickness in the camp was for all the world the thrack av a man walkin' 4 times in a figure av 8 through the tents. They say tease the wanderin' Jew takes the cholera wid him, I believe ut. And that, said Mulvaney illogically, is the cause why little Johnsy McKenna is F what she is. She was brought up by the quartermaster sergeant's wife when McKenna died. But she belongs to be company, and this tale I am tellin' you wid a proper appreciation av Johnsy McKenna. I've belted into every recruity av the company, as he was drafted. Faith, 'twas me belted Corporal Slane into askin' the girl. Not really. Man, I did. She's no beauty to look at, but she's Ud Pamelo's daughter, and 'tis my duty to provide for her. Just before Slane got his promotion, I says to him, Slane, says I, tomorrow 'twill be insubordination av me to chastise you, but by the soul av Ud Pamelo, who is now in glory, av you don't give me your word to ask Johnsy McKenna at once, ill peel the flesh off your bones wid a brass huck. Tonight 'tis a disgrace to be company. She's been single so long, says Roman 1. Was I goin' to let a 3-year-old presume to discourse wid Memmy? Well, Bain set, no. Slane went and asked her. He's a good boy, is Slane. One av these days hell get into the commissariat and drive a buggy wid hissavins. So I provided for Ud Pamelo's daughter, And now, you go along and dance again wid her. And I Roman 999, I felt a respect for Miss Jauncey McKenna, and I went to her wedding later on. Perhaps I will tell you about that one of these days.